The prison guard's hands were shaking as he wrote his incident report. He'd worked at the maximum security facility for 12 years. He'd seen stabbings, riots, suicide attempts. He thought nothing could shock him anymore. But what he'd just witnessed in cell block D made him question whether he could continue this job. An inmate had been found dead in his cell. Not unusual in a prison. But the way he died was impossible. His cell door had been locked from the outside all night. No one had entered. Security cameras confirmed it. Yet the inmate had been strangled. The medical examiner confirmed ligature marks on his neck consistent with manual strangulation. Someone had choked him to death with their bare hands. In a locked cell. With no one else inside. 3 other inmates in adjacent cells all reported the same thing. They heard him struggling, gasping for air, begging someone to stop. For 7 minutes, they heard him die. But when guards arrived and opened the cell, he was alone. Completely alone. And before I tell you what the investigation uncovered, make sure you subscribe and hit that like button, because what prison guards witness behind those walls will haunt you long after this video ends. Prison guards see humanity at its absolute worst. They work in environments where violence is currency, where manipulation is survival, and where some people have nothing left to lose. They're not just guards. They're witnesses to things that would break most people. Things they can never talk about with family or friends because no one outside those walls could possibly understand. These are their confessions. These are the most disturbing things they've ever witnessed. And once you hear these stories, you'll understand why some of them can never sleep properly again. Let's start with something that seems small but reveals the depth of psychological warfare that happens in prisons. A guard named Marcus worked at a medium security facility in Ohio for 8 years. He watched an inmate named David conduct what Marcus calls the slowest murder he's ever seen. David had a cellmate named Tony. They seemed to get along fine at first. No fights. No obvious tension. But Marcus noticed something strange over the course of 6 months. David would do small things to mess with Tony. He'd move Tony's belongings slightly when Tony wasn't looking. He'd eat half of Tony's commissary items and rearrange what was left so it looked untouched. He'd whisper to Tony while he was sleeping, just loud enough to disturb him but quiet enough that Tony would think he was dreaming. Marcus noticed Tony deteriorating mentally. He started talking to himself. Started reporting things that weren't happening. Started showing signs of severe paranoia and sleep deprivation. Marcus tried to intervene, tried to get Tony moved to a different cell, but there was no official justification. No violence. No threats. Just one man slowly destroying another man's mind. After 8 months, Tony attempted suicide. He survived but was transferred to a psychiatric facility. David smiled when they took Tony away. Marcus went to the warden, explained what he'd witnessed. The warden said without evidence of direct threats or violence, there was nothing they could do. David had committed the perfect crime. He'd tortured a man psychologically for months without ever breaking a single rule. Marcus still thinks about Tony. Wonders if he ever recovered. Wonders how many other inmates are doing the same thing right now. Slowly destroying their cellmates in ways that leave no marks, no evidence, just broken minds. Now let me tell you about what a guard named Sarah witnessed in a women's prison in California. She'd been warned that female prisons were different from male prisons. The violence was less frequent but more personal when it happened. What she wasn't prepared for was the level of manipulation. There was an inmate named Rebecca who ran the entire cell block without officially being in charge of anything. She never threatened anyone directly. Never got her hands dirty. But she controlled everything through a network of favors and debts. Sarah watched Rebecca orchestrate an attack on another inmate who disrespected her. Rebecca never said the words, hurt her, or anything that could be used against her. She just mentioned casually to one inmate that someone had been spreading rumors about that inmate's family. To another, she mentioned that someone had stolen from the commissary. To a third, she said someone was planning to snitch to guards about contraband. None of it was true. But within 3 days, 3 different inmates attacked the woman Rebecca had targeted. All 3 thought they had their own legitimate reasons. All 3 had no idea they'd been manipulated. The victim was hospitalized. All 3 attackers got solitary confinement. Rebecca was never implicated because she'd never directly ordered anything. Sarah tried to explain the manipulation to her supervisors but couldn't prove it. Rebecca was too smart. Too careful. She operated like a puppet master, pulling strings no one could see. Sarah said the disturbing part wasn't the violence. It was watching someone orchestrate it so perfectly that no one, not even the people doing the violence, understood they were being used. Let's talk about the guard who witnessed something that made him believe in pure evil. His name is James, and he worked at a maximum security prison in Texas. There was an inmate on death row who'd murdered multiple people. During his time on death row, he'd write letters to the families of his victims. Not apology letters. Detailed descriptions of how their loved ones had died. What they'd said. What they'd begged for. How long they'd suffered. The families would call the prison, traumatized all over again. Guards would confiscate his writing materials. He'd find new ways to get paper and pens. They'd put him in isolation. He'd memorize the letters and recite them to guards, asking them to deliver the messages. James said this inmate had no other goal except to cause maximum psychological pain to people who'd already suffered unimaginable loss. He wasn't trying to get anything. Wasn't negotiating for better conditions. He just wanted to hurt people because that's what gave him satisfaction. James was there for the inmate's execution. The man's last words were the name of one of his victims and a detail about her death that had never been made public. The victim's mother was there as a witness. She collapsed. James said watching that inmate die didn't bring him any satisfaction because he knew the man had won. He'd gotten one last opportunity to cause pain. That was 10 years ago. James still has nightmares about that inmate's smile. About the pure enjoyment he got from hurting people, right up until his final breath. Here's a story from a guard named Michael that shows how suicide in prison is sometimes more disturbing than the obvious cases. An inmate named Robert had been in prison for 15 years. Model prisoner. Never caused trouble. Applied for parole and got denied. 3 weeks later, he killed himself. That alone isn't unusual. Inmates kill themselves after parole denials regularly. What disturbed Michael was what they found in Robert's cell. A journal documenting 3 years of planning his suicide. Robert had been preparing for this possibility since his first parole hearing. He'd written detailed notes about different methods, which would be quickest, which would be most certain. He'd practiced tying knots. He'd tested the structural integrity of different fixtures in his cell. He'd written goodbye letters to people he hadn't seen in over a decade. For 3 years, he'd been living with the plan, refining it, treating his suicide like a project he was committed to completing if parole didn't work out. Michael said the disturbing part was the calculation. Robert had spent 3 years mentally preparing to end his life while appearing completely normal to everyone around him. He'd gone to meals, work assignments, rec time, all while knowing that if parole didn't go his way, he had a detailed plan ready to execute. The journal showed a man who'd accepted death so completely that he turned it into something methodical. Something almost professional. Michael said it changed how he looks at inmates who seem fine. Because Robert seemed fine right up until he wasn't. Now let me tell you about the incident that opened this story. The impossible strangulation in a locked cell. The investigation revealed something even more disturbing than a supernatural explanation. The victim, an inmate named Carlos, had been strangled. But not by another person. He'd strangled himself. Investigators found that Carlos had developed a technique using a towel and the bed frame where he could apply pressure to his own neck while in a position where he couldn't stop once unconsciousness set in. He'd essentially built a suicide machine out of prison furniture. The medical examiner confirmed it was possible but incredibly rare. Why would someone choose such a horrific method? Carlos had left a note. He wanted other inmates to think he'd been murdered. Wanted them to live in fear. Wanted guards to investigate them. Wanted chaos. His final act was to create a mystery that would disturb everyone and make people suspect each other. The guard who found him said knowing it was suicide didn't make it less disturbing. Carlos had committed to dying in one of the most terrifying ways possible just to mess with people's heads. That level of hatred, that dedication to causing fear even in death, was more disturbing than if he'd actually been murdered. Let's talk about what a guard named Jennifer witnessed involving children. Some prisons allow inmates to have visits with their kids. It's supposed to be positive. Maintain family connections. But Jennifer watched an inmate use his 7-year-old daughter as a drug mule. During a visit, he convinced the little girl it was a game to bring daddy a present. She smuggled in drugs without knowing what she was doing. Security caught it. The father showed no remorse. Said his daughter wouldn't face consequences because she's a child, so it was a victimless crime. Jennifer said watching a parent weaponize their own child's innocence like that was one of the most disturbing things she'd seen. That little girl trusted her father. Loved her father. And he used that trust to put her at risk and turn her into an unwitting criminal. The man lost visitation privileges, but that didn't help the damage done to that child. Jennifer said she thinks about that girl sometimes. Wonders if she understands now what her father made her do. Wonders if that betrayal affected her ability to trust people. Here's a story about prison guard corruption that shows how disturbing the job can become. A guard named Thomas worked at a facility where he slowly realized several guards were running contraband operations. They were bringing in drugs, phones, weapons, and selling them to inmates. Thomas reported it through official channels. Nothing happened. He reported it again. Still nothing. Then he started getting threats. Not from inmates. From other guards. They told him to keep his mouth shut or there would be consequences. Thomas persisted. One night, his brake lines were cut. He survived but realized the corruption went higher than he'd thought. Some supervisors were involved. Maybe the warden. He couldn't trust anyone. He eventually went to the FBI. Federal investigation resulted in 12 arrests. Guards, supervisors, even 2 captains. But here's the disturbing part: Thomas still works in corrections, different facility now, and he said he can never fully trust his fellow guards again. He always wonders who's corrupt. Who's willing to compromise safety for money? Who would threaten a colleague for doing the right thing? The experience taught him that sometimes the monsters aren't the inmates. Sometimes they're wearing the same uniform you are. Let me tell you about a mass casualty event that a guard named David witnessed. A riot broke out in his facility. Started in the cafeteria and spread to 2 cell blocks. David was one of the guards trapped in the initial area when it started. He watched inmates attack each other, settling scores they'd been holding for years. He watched 3 inmates die. Watched one man get beaten so badly his own mother wouldn't recognize him. David was hiding in a storage room for 2 hours before tactical teams secured the area. He said the violence was disturbing, but what haunted him more was the aftermath. Walking through the facility, seeing the destruction. The blood. The makeshift weapons. The bodies. And then having to return to work the next week like nothing had happened. The prison provided 1 counseling session. 1. After witnessing multiple deaths and fearing for his own life for 2 hours, David developed PTSD. Started drinking heavily. His marriage fell apart. He eventually got help and is doing better now, but he said the disturbing part was how the system treated it like a normal part of the job. Guards are expected to witness traumatic violence and just keep working. No real support. No acknowledgement of the psychological damage. Just get back to your post. Here's something that seems small but reveals deep dysfunction. A guard named Lisa watched an inmate named Martin spend 3 years befriending guards, learning about their lives, their families, their routines. Martin was serving life, no possibility of parole. He had nothing but time. He used that time to collect information. When one guard mentioned his daughter's soccer games, Martin remembered which days, which fields. When another guard mentioned his wife's birthday, Martin remembered the date. He never did anything with the information. Never threatened anyone. But one day, Martin casually mentioned to a guard that he knew where the guard's daughter went to school. Knew her schedule. Knew her route home. The guard reported it immediately. Investigators found notebooks in Martin's cell filled with information about staff. Home addresses, family members, daily routines. All collected from casual conversations over years. Martin had created detailed dossiers on over 20 guards. Again, he'd never threatened anyone. Never used the information. He just collected it. Lisa said it was disturbing because it showed the long game some inmates play. Martin had spent 3 years gathering intelligence for no apparent reason except to have it. To know things. To hold power through knowledge even if he never used it. Every guard at that facility had to reassess every conversation they'd ever had with Martin. Had to wonder what information they'd inadvertently given him about their lives, their families. It poisoned the already fragile trust between staff and inmates. Now let me tell you about something that changed how one guard sees humanity. A guard named Robert witnessed an inmate named James die of natural causes. Old age and illness. Nothing violent. But in James's final weeks, Robert watched something beautiful happen in the most unlikely place. Other inmates took care of James. They shared their commissary when he couldn't eat regular food. They sat with him when he was scared. They made sure he wasn't alone. These were violent criminals, some serving life for terrible things. But they showed compassion to a dying man. When James died, Robert watched hardened criminals cry. Actually grieve. It disturbed Robert in a different way. It forced him to see inmates as human beings capable of love and compassion, even in an environment designed to strip humanity away. Robert said it's disturbing because it's easier to do this job when you can dehumanize inmates. When you can see them as just criminals. But watching them care for each other, mourn each other, show real human emotion, makes it harder. Because then you have to acknowledge that you're witnessing human suffering on a massive scale. That the people locked up, even the worst of them, are still capable of humanity. And that makes the job emotionally complicated in ways Robert wasn't prepared for. Let me tell you one final story. A guard named Angela worked in a maximum security facility where an inmate named Marcus was considered the most dangerous person in the entire prison. Multiple murders, assaults on guards, absolute violence. But Angela noticed something. Marcus had one photo in his cell. A little boy, maybe 5 years old. His son. Angela watched Marcus stare at that photo for hours. One day, she asked him about it. Marcus told her his son was the only good thing he'd ever created. Said he thinks about him every day. Wonders if the boy remembers him. Hopes the boy grows up better than he did. Angela said it was one of the most disturbing conversations she's ever had because Marcus was crying. This man who'd killed people with his bare hands, who guards feared, who other inmates avoided, was crying over a photo of his son. It disturbed Angela because it showed that even the worst people have something human left inside them. And that makes the tragedy of prison even deeper. Marcus will never see his son again. Will never be part of his life. Will die in that cell. And somewhere out there, that little boy will grow up knowing his father was a monster. Angela said she'll never forget Marcus's face when he talked about his son. The genuine pain. The real love. It's disturbing because we want to believe the worst criminals are completely evil. That there's nothing redeemable. But sometimes they're just broken people who made terrible choices and have to live with consequences that extend beyond their own suffering. So here we are. You've heard the confessions. The psychological torture that leaves no marks. The manipulation that turns people into weapons. The inmate who tortured families from death row. The man who planned his suicide for 3 years. The impossible death that was actually more disturbing than it appeared. The father who weaponized his daughter's innocence. The corruption among guards themselves. The riot survivor with PTSD. The inmate who collected information on guards' families. The dying man cared for by criminals. And the violent killer who cries over his son's photo. These stories prove that prisons are more disturbing than most people imagine. It's not just about violence and danger. It's about the psychological warfare. The manipulation. The long-term mental deterioration. The corruption. The trauma that guards carry. The impossible moral complexity of seeing humanity in people who've done inhuman things. Prison guards will tell you the job changes you. You see things you can't unsee. You hear things you can't unhear. You witness human nature at its worst and occasionally at its most unexpectedly compassionate. And you carry all of it with you. You can't talk about it at family dinners. Can't explain to friends why you're different now. Can't make people understand what it's like to work in an environment where violence is normal and tragedy is just another Tuesday. The guards who shared these stories want you to understand something. They're not asking for sympathy. They chose this job. But they want people to know that what happens behind prison walls is more complex and disturbing than movies or TV shows depict. It's not dramatic. It's grinding. It's watching people destroy each other slowly. It's witnessing manipulation so subtle that no one can prove it's happening. It's carrying the weight of things you witnessed years ago that still wake you up at night. So the next time you think about prisons, remember these stories. Remember that guards are witnessing things that would break most people. Remember that behind those walls, human nature reveals itself in ways both horrifying and occasionally surprisingly human. Remember that some people work in darkness so the rest of us don't have to see it. And remember that every single one of these confessions represents real people, real trauma, real psychological scars that these guards will carry for the rest of their lives. The walls keep inmates in. But they also keep secrets. And the guards are the ones who have to live with those secrets, who have to witness the worst of humanity and still show up for their shift the next day. That's what makes their confessions so disturbing. Not just what they witnessed, but the fact that they have to keep witnessing it, day after day, year after year, carrying the weight of things most people will never have to see or understand.